There is neither happiness nor misery in the world. There is only the comparison of one state with another, nothing more. Who has felt the deepest grief is best able to experience supreme happiness. We must have felt what it is to die, that we may appreciate the enjoyments of living. Live then, and be happy, beloved children of my heart, and never forget that until the day when God shall deign to reveal the future to man, all human wisdom is summed up in these two words, wait and hope. This text could easily have come from any of the texts that we read on Tisha B'Av, or specifically from Shabbat Nachamu, the Shabbat where we're offered comfort by God through the words of the prophet Yeshayahu, Isaiah. But these words are actually the final words of Edmond Dantes, better known as the Count of Monte Cristo, from the eponymous book written by Alexandre Dumas, who is perhaps more known for his work, The Three Musketeers. Without giving too much away from the plot, the basic idea is that this young man, Edmond Dantes, right before his wedding, is framed for a crime he very much did not commit, and he rots away in jail for years. There's an older man who helps him escape, gives him his fortune, and the whole book is about vengeance, about him trying to commit revenge on the people who framed him, put him in jail. But through that journey, he learns so much about the human condition, about his role, and also what it's like to play God, which is essentially what he did. But in the end, to this young couple who have a brighter future ahead of them, he offers this advice: no matter how bad, how dark, the human condition is about waiting and hoping, because as bad as we think it is now, there's always hope on the horizon. And that's the message that the prophet Isaiah Yeshayahu gives to us in this week's Haftarah, again known as Nachamu, from the beginning of words, Nachamu, Nachamu, Ami, be comforted, my nation, God says to us through the prophet Yeshayahu. And there's a beautiful verse very early on in this Haftarah, which gives very interesting kind of imagery. It says, Kol kore b'midbar, panu derech Hashem, yashru be'arava, misla lelokenu. A voice rings out, a voice calls out, clear, pure in the desert, a road for Hashem, a path for Hashem, level, literally like leveling out the road in the wilderness and the Arava, the dry land, a highway, a path for Hashem. Now, God doesn't need roads, just like God doesn't need a house, God doesn't need sacrifices. So all of these things that we are supposed to physically do somehow are to serve us. And Rashi makes it quite explicit. He says, Derech Yerushalayim lashuv v'yoteha letocha, that this path for Hashem isn't a path for Hashem's sake, it is a path to Hashem, that we should make sure that when it's time to go back to Yerushalayim, the path is ready for us. And the message there is really important. It's not just that we sit around and hope that God will one day magically bring us back, because the prophecy of Yeshua is that God will bring us back. But part of that prophecy, God said, is get ready. Make sure that you are ready, so that when I want to send you back to Yerushalayim to rebuild the temple, you're ready to go. You know how to build it, you know how to design it, you know the laws, you have your bags packed, as it were. So it's not just about hoping, it's also about doing our due diligence, about working hard to prepare ourselves for that incredible moment. Now, as we're coming out of Tisha B'Av, or at least when I'm recording this, but certainly going into the Shabbat Nachamu of comfort, we want to ask ourselves the question, what were we supposed to get out of Tisha B'Av? We certainly mourned the destruction of both temples and several other events in history, destruction of the town of Beitar. And we have to ask ourselves, what does that mourning, what does it do for us? Now, the mourning itself helps remind us of what is important. We mourn the loss of things that we care about, that we value, whether it's a family member or a temple. And if somebody writes off Tisha B'Av completely, that says something powerful. Not that everyone has to feel a deep emotional impact, but even thinking it's important really says something about one's value system. But the fasting is not a method of mourning. We fast on lots of special days, the other fast days, 10th of Tevet, 17th of Tammuz, and of course, Yom Kippur. So what is the fasting about? And the point of the day of Tisha B'Av, there's two main messages. The one is, remember what is important to you. Remember and appreciate what you lost and you're trying to gain back. And the second one is, how do we get there? And Rambam, in his Hilchot Ta'aniyot, in his laws of fasts, he says it quite beautifully. He says, Yesham Yamim Shekol Yisrael Mit'anim Bahem. There are days in the calendar where all Israel fasts. And he continues, and I'll read the English here, because of the troubles that occurred on them, in order to awaken their hearts to teshuvah, So this isn't about Yom Kippur, although perhaps Yom Kippur is about a personal trouble and not a national one. But here's what he says about the purpose to fast, because it's not a form of mourning. A tragic event initiates the day, inspires the day, but here's what's supposed to happen when we mourn. Introspection and personal growth. Introspection and personal growth. The fast days help us focus on our improper behavior and that of our ancestors that led to the misfortunes that befell both them and us. By recalling these things, we will engage in introspection and improve ourselves. The reason that our people were exiled from Yerushalayim were consequences for our actions and our free will choices. God gave us free choice and free will, and we used those decisions or we made the bad decisions that led to our exile. And now that God is promising that he will make sure that we will return, he also says, make sure that you make the right decisions, the right choices, so that when the time comes, you will be ready. And more importantly, that when we go back, we're not going to mess it up all over again. And that's the message of Yom Kippur, certainly as Elul is coming up soon, is we have to think about not just saying sorry for the sins we did, but how did we get into this mess in the first place? What kind of behavior did we have? What kind of actions were we taking that led us to mess up, to sin, to hurt people? So it's not just about hope and saying sorry. It's also about doing the hard personal work and growth and national work to think about how did we get in this mess and how can we be better next time. So returning to the beautiful quote from Alexandre Dumas, said in a note by Edmond Dantes, I would change the last little bit. Instead of wisdom for the whole world, or perhaps it could be, I would say all Jewish wisdom is summed up in these two words, hope and mitzvot. Hope will give us the inspiration, the power, and the strength to drive ourselves forward, but only through the hard work, the commandments, the work of tshuva, the work of personal assessment, will we actually be able to improve and make sure that next time it goes differently and it goes much better. Shabbat Shalom. May you all be comforted among the mourners of Israel and Al Zion.